Welcome to Tales of the Bard. Step into a world where stories come alive and imagination knows no bounds. Join me as I weave enchanting tales reminiscent of the bards of old, sharing legends, myths, and original stories that will transport you to distant lands and forgotten times. The soft light of dawn filtered through the towering trees of the Druid's Grove as Elias, Ronan, and Milas arrived, their steps cushioned by the mossy forest floor. The grove was alive with quiet energy, ancient trees stretching their branches toward the sky while birdsong filled the air. Waiting for them were Ronan's parents, Darian Stormrider and Alara, standing near the massive blue tree that served as the heart of the Druid's network. Skryla flew in moments later, transforming mid-air from her silver falcon form back into her human shape. She landed gracefully, her eyes sharp, already calculating their next steps. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice tense. "They'll find the guards cocooned in silk, and Venom will know I was involved in Elias and Milas's escape." Darian, tall and weathered, his presence calm yet commanding, nodded thoughtfully. "We can go to my farm," he suggested. "It's secluded and part of the Druid network. We can train Elias there, and he'll have plenty of animals to keep him busy." Alara, standing beside him with her fiery red hair catching the light, placed a reassuring hand on Elias's shoulder. "You'll be safe with us," she said gently, her green eyes warm. "The farm is quiet, away from prying eyes, and the animals will help you settle in." Ronan looked to his father, nodding in agreement. "Good idea, father. The grove is sacred, but it's not hidden. Venom has her ways. She could easily track us here if she suspects we're involved." Just then, Shadow, the massive black cat, padded silently into the clearing with Jaunty in tow, his lute slung across his back. Shadow's green eyes met Ronan's, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Ronan greeted them both with a nod. "Good timing," he said. "Johnny, I think it's best if you go with my father to the farm. You'll be safer there, away from Calder and his spies. They won't be able to reach you with the warwolves and battlebears patrolling the grounds." Jaunty let out a slow breath, understanding that his usual life was far behind him now. He nodded, glancing at Darian. "Thank you, Darian. I'm grateful for your help, and it'll be good to lay low for a while. Perhaps I can be of use around the farm." Darian clapped him on the shoulder, a reassuring smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "You'll find it peaceful, Jaunty, and you'll be under the protection of the warwolves and battlebears. They don't miss much, so if anyone tries to approach the farm, we'll know." Skryla gave a final glance at the surrounding grove, her eyes lingering on the blue tree. "Let's not waste any more time," she said. "The network of blue trees can transport us there swiftly and without leaving a trace. We can reach the farm before word of the cocooned guards spreads." Ronan gave Skryla a firm nod. "Then let's go. The farm will be a safe haven for now." With that, they gathered around the base of the blue tree, its bark shimmering faintly as they prepared to travel. Darian placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, Alara's comforting presence by his side, and together, with quiet resolve, they disappeared through the Druid network, bound for the safety of Darian's secluded farm. Just before they gathered around the ancient blue tree, preparing to leave for the safety of Darian's farm, Ronan noticed Shadow standing stock still, his entire body tense, ears flattened and tail low. Shadow's gaze was fixed on something in the branches above, a crow, perched not far away, watching them with beady black eyes. The bird's feathers were dark as night, and its gaze seemed too focused, too knowing. Ronan's stomach twisted with suspicion. Could it be one of Malghora's spies? The crow cocked its head, its black eyes glinting in the dawn light, staring back at Shadow with an unnerving intensity. Shadow's fur bristled, his green eyes huge and unblinking as he returned the stare. The silence stretched, thick with tension, and Ronan felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Shadow knew something was wrong. His body language made it clear. But just as the bark of the blue tree began to shimmer, the crow let out a sharp caw and took off, wings beating swiftly as it disappeared into the trees. Shadow turned to Ronan, his gaze piercing as if to warn him, his eyes conveying what words could not. Ronan felt a surge of unease, but it was too late to act. The magic of the blue tree had taken hold, surrounding them in a shimmering glow. There was nothing he could do now. As the blue light enveloped them, transporting them away, Ronan couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Shadow's unblinking stare lingered in his mind, a silent warning. The crow had seen them depart, and if it was indeed Malghora's spy, their destination was no longer a secret. Moments later, they vanished from the Druid's Grove, swept away by the tree's powerful magic, leaving the crow's ominous presence behind. In the dim glow of her lair, Malghora watched the towering, multi-limbed figure before her. Draxfus, the monstrous creature of sinew and scales, stood silent, his blank, expressionless face staring ahead. But beneath the grotesque form, she knew the truth. Loran, Ronan's brother, was still trapped inside, clinging desperately to fragments of his former self. A flicker of movement caught Malghora's eye as she noticed a faint glimmer of awareness in Draxfus's gaze. It was small but unmistakable, a glimpse of Loran struggling to break free. The monster's shoulders twitched, and for the briefest moment, its 6 arms trembled. "Ah, Loran," Malghora murmured, a cold smile curling across her lips. She lifted her hands, the air between her fingers swirling with dark energy. "Did you really think you could escape me?" With a low chant, she cast the binding spell again, her voice dripping with malice. The dark magic took hold, like invisible chains coiling around Draxfus, sinking into his very soul. The flicker of Loran's consciousness faded, buried once more beneath layers of darkness. Draxfus's many-limbed body stilled, his expression returning to its vacant, lifeless stare. "There we are," Malghora purred, satisfied. She cast a sidelong glance at a crow perched nearby, its beady eyes glinting with purpose. The bird had flown fast, crossing vast distances through the web of shadows that connected Malghora's dark network, a network that rivaled even the druid's ancient pathways. Malghora turned back to Draxfus, her smile growing wider, more wicked. "Seems you'll have to travel a bit, my dear Draxfus. The druids may have their blue tree network, but they are not the only ones with pathways across this land. We shall use the dark network." She stepped closer to Draxfus, her cold hand reaching up to trace the jagged scales on his chest. "You'll see your family, Loran," she cooed mockingly, her voice soft with malice. "You'll be reunited with dear Ronan, with Alera and Darian. Won't that be sweet?" Draxfus's many eyes flickered briefly, a dim echo of the boy he once was, trapped beneath his monstrous exterior. But his face remained blank, and Malghora chuckled, the sound low and sinister. "Ah, the silent type, I see," she said, a gleeful edge to her voice. "Don't worry. Soon you'll have plenty to say, once you're tearing them all to pieces." With a final chilling smile, Malghora stepped back, raising her hands. Shadows coiled around Draxfus, swirling up like smoke, preparing to send him through the dark network. The druids may have believed they could protect Ronan and his allies, but Malghora would show them how wrong they were. As the shadows enveloped Draxfus, her laughter echoed in the darkness, a promise of the blood that would soon stain their paths. The group emerged from the shimmering blue tree into the quiet rolling hills of Darian's farm. The air here was fresh, filled with the scent of earth and wildflowers, and the landscape was dotted with fields and ancient trees. Darian's farm was more than a sanctuary. It was a hidden stronghold surrounded by natural barriers and guarded by fierce allies. As they stepped forward, 2 figures appeared at the edge of the field, a towering warwolf with sleek dark fur and piercing yellow eyes, and a massive battlebear, its thick coat gleaming in the sunlight. Both creatures moved with grace and power, their eyes sharp and their attention focused on the new arrivals. The warwolf inclined its head respectfully toward Skryla and Ronan, while the battlebear let out a low, rumbling growl of welcome. Ronan's face softened as he stepped forward, greeting them in wild speak, his voice low and rhythmic as he exchanged words with their animal guardians. Skryla joined him, her voice weaving smoothly into the conversation, her words carrying an authority that only those skilled in wild speak could command. Their tones were calm, but urgency flickered beneath the surface of their exchange. After a moment, Ronan turned back to the others, his expression grave. "They've spotted something troubling not far from here," he said, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "A black tree, huge and twisted, has appeared on the far edge of the forest." Alera frowned, her hand instinctively moving to Elias's shoulder in a protective gesture. "A black tree? But only the druids' blue trees are supposed to link across the land." Skryla's face was tense as she nodded. "That's true, but Malghora's network, her dark network, mimics our own, twisting nature's magic for her own purposes. The black trees serve as a means for her dark forces to travel, just as the blue trees do for us." Darian's jaw tightened, his gaze shifting toward the distant horizon. "Then it's not just a threat, it's an invasion route. If Malghora's followers can reach us through these dark trees, we're no longer safe here." Ronan nodded grimly. Skryla and I will go with the warwolves and battlebears to inspect the black tree. We need to determine the extent of the threat, and if possible, shut down its connection to the dark network. He turned to the others, his expression softening slightly. The rest of you go to the farmhouse. It's fortified, and Darian and Alara will be there to watch over you. Elias looked uncertain, his gaze shifting between Ronan and the farmhouse. Will you be safe? Ronan placed a reassuring hand on Elias's shoulder. We'll be careful, and don't worry, the warwolves and battlebears will be by our side. With a nod, Darian gestured for Elias, Alara, Milas, and Jonty to follow him to the farmhouse. As they made their way up the path, the warwolf let out a low, howling signal, and 3 more warwolves appeared at the edge of the woods, joining the group with silent determination. The battlebear snorted, leading the way, its massive paws moving with surprising quiet as it began the journey toward the ominous black tree. Skryla's eyes met Ronan's, and with a final glance at the others, they stepped forward, disappearing into the forest alongside the warwolves and battlebears, bound for the dark tree and the unknown dangers that awaited them. Guided by the silent forms of the warwolves and battlebears, Ronan and Skryla moved through the dense forest until they reached the edge of a clearing. There, towering before them, was the black tree. Its gnarled, twisted branches reached toward the sky like dark claws, its bark sickly and cracked, oozing a faint dark mist that tainted the air with a heavy, oppressive presence. Ronan could feel it, the unmistakable pulse of dark magic emanating from the tree, cold and sinister. Skryla shifted uneasily, her gaze fixed on the tree as the animals positioned themselves, surrounding it, ready to strike. "This isn't just any dark tree," she murmured. "It's a gateway, a portal for Malghora's dark creatures." Suddenly, a surge of energy crackled through the air, like a shuddering breath from the tree itself. The warwolves let out low growls, their hackles rising, and the battlebears bared their teeth, digging their claws into the earth, bracing for whatever emerged. Without warning, the black mist swirling around the tree began to intensify, thickening and churning until it formed a vortex at the tree's base. From within the spinning darkness, a monstrous figure emerged, a huge, many-limbed creature with gleaming, jagged scales and eyes that burned with an unnatural glow. Draxfus had arrived. Ronan's heart twisted as he recognized the faint, painful echo of his brother Loran trapped within the monstrous form. But there was no time to dwell. Draxfus's eyes glinted with malice, his movements swift and lethal as he lashed out at the surrounding animals. With one powerful swipe, he sent several warwolves and a battlebear flying through the air, their bodies slamming against trees before they hit the ground, dazed but undeterred. Skryla let out a fierce hiss, her body shifting seamlessly into her spider form. She scuttled to the side, watching Draxfus's movements with keen eyes as she readied herself to strike. Ronan lifted his staff, channeling his power with fierce focus. He swung the staff, calling forth the energy within him, and a powerful whirlwind erupted, encircling Draxfus and holding him in place. The winds whipped around the monster, tearing at his scales and forcing his many limbs to the side. Draxfus thrashed, his claws slicing through the air as he struggled against the force holding him. "Now, Skryla!" Ronan shouted, straining to maintain the whirlwind. Without hesitation, Skryla lunged forward, spinning thick threads of web from her spinnerets. She darted around Draxfus, skillfully cocooning him with layer upon layer of silk, each thread binding him tighter, restraining his movements until he was wrapped tightly in her shimmering web. For a moment, silence fell. Draxfus, though trapped, continued to strain against the bonds, his eyes glowing with rage and desperation. Ronan lowered his staff, breathing heavily, and turned to Skryla. "My brother is trapped in this monster," he said, his voice laced with a quiet pain. The creature before him was hardly recognizable, but he could feel it, Loran's essence buried deep within. Skryla shifted back into her human form, her face serious as she regarded Ronan. "Then we have to get him out." Ronan looked at her, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "How? Malghora's magic is ancient and twisted. I've tried to reach him before, and it's like a wall of darkness blocks any light I send his way." Skryla placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with determination. "We've both been touched by the healing pool, Ronan. Its light lives within us now. Together, our power may be enough to reach through the darkness and free him." Ronan nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope and purpose. He gripped his staff tightly, focusing his energy. Skryla took his hand, their combined warmth sparking between them as they drew upon the healing light that lingered within. the ancient energy of the druid's pool that had once bathed them both in its restorative glow. They closed their eyes, channeling the light toward Draxfus, pushing it through the layers of dark magic that encased him, like piercing through thick shadows with rays of pure sunlight. Ronan felt a surge of resistance. The darkness around Loran was dense, clawing, refusing to yield. But Skryla's grip tightened, and together their light intensified, pouring through the web of shadows until they sensed something shift, a faint but undeniable presence, a glimmer of Loran's spirit, reaching out, yearning to break free. Draxfus's form convulsed, a muffled roar tearing through the cocoon as the light began to breach Malghora's spell. For the first time, the creature's expression flickered, and a glint of recognition sparked in his eyes. "Loran," Ronan whispered, his voice a mixture of love and desperation. "Fight it. We're here. Come back to us." The creature shuddered, its many limbs straining as the cocoon held it in place. The darkness surrounding Loran wavered, weakened by the combined force of Ronan and Skryla's healing touch. They held on, pouring every ounce of their light into the spell, hoping, praying that they could bring Loran back from the darkness and end Malghora's cruel hold over him once and for all. The air was thick with tension, the web of shadows around Draxfus slowly dissipating as Ronan and Skryla poured their light into the cocoon. Just as their strength began to wane, they heard a muffled voice from within the silk binding. The sound was faint, struggling through layers of darkness, but unmistakable. Ronan's heart leapt as he recognized it, Loran's voice muffled but brimming with familiar mischief. "Who do I have to kill to get out of this cocoon?" Loran's voice rang out, tinged with exasperation. Ronan felt a wave of relief wash over him, his shoulders sagging as a smile broke across his face. Skryla's laughter bubbled up beside him, the tension in her expression softening into a look of triumph. "Seems he hasn't lost his sense of humor," Skryla chuckled, her voice filled with warmth. They both worked quickly, loosening the silken bindings around Loran until he was finally freed from the monstrous form that had imprisoned him. The twisted, lifeless husk of Draxfus crumbled around them, and Loran, now fully himself, stumbled forward, his face streaked with exhaustion and relief. His eyes met Ronan's, a glimmer of recognition shining in them as tears pooled at the edges. "Brother!" Loran cried, his voice choked with emotion. He threw his arms around Ronan, gripping him tightly, as if to confirm that this wasn't just a fleeting dream. His shoulders shook with barely restrained joy, the weight of his captivity lifting as he embraced his older brother. Ronan hugged him back just as fiercely, his own eyes stinging. "You're free, Loran. You're really free." But their joy was short-lived. Out of the corner of his eye, Ronan caught a flash of movement, a crow, perched high above them in the branches of a nearby tree, watching them with unsettling intensity. It was the same crow he'd seen earlier in the grove. "Skryla," Ronan whispered, nodding toward the bird. In an instant, Skryla's instincts kicked in. With a swift flick of her hand, she spun a silk web from her fingertips, sending it flying toward the crow. The strands wrapped around the bird, cocooning it in a tight bundle before it could even caw in alarm. The crow struggled briefly before going limp, its dark magic snuffed out within the confines of the web. "Malghora won't get any reports from this one," Skryla muttered, casting a satisfied glance at the cocooned bird. She secured it with a final tug of silk, leaving the spy trapped and silenced. With the threat contained, Ronan turned his attention back to Loran, his hand resting on his brother's shoulder. "You're safe now, Loran. Malghora's grip on you is broken." Loran looked at him, a smile breaking through his tears. "I thought I'd never see you again," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "It felt like a nightmare I'd never wake from." Skryla placed a comforting hand on Loran's other shoulder, her face softening. "You're with family now, and as long as we're here, no darkness will claim you again." The three of them stood together, the weight of their victory settling over them, knowing that while the battle with Malghora was far from over, they had won back something priceless: family. Ronan gazed at the ominous black tree towering over them, its twisted branches still radiating an unsettling aura. He pointed toward it, his expression hard. "What about this, Skryla?" he asked. "We can't just leave it here, not with Malghora's magic flowing through it." Skryla nodded, her face resolute as she regarded the dark tree. "I agree," she replied. "This is more than just a doorway. It's part of Malghora's network, a piece of her web across the land. If I follow its line to a hub, we might be able to sever her entire connection here. I may even be able to trace it back to her hideout." Ronan's brows knit together. "It's dangerous. We'll need your strength, especially with Malghora knowing we're onto her." Skryla smiled faintly, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Leave it with me. I've dealt with darkness before." With that, she began her transformation, her form shifting gracefully as feathers replaced her human shape, her arms melding into powerful silver wings. Loran let out a yelp of amazement, his eyes wide as he watched Skryla become a silver falcon. "Wow, can you teach me that?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Skryla chuckled, her falcon's beak parting in what seemed almost like a smile. "One day," she replied, her voice warm, "when I'm not so busy." With a final nod to Ronan, she leaned down and scooped up the cocoon crow in her talons. With a powerful beat of her wings, Skryla soared into the sky, gliding in circles around the black tree before cutting through the air, following the faint trail of dark energy radiating from its branches. The silver shimmer of her feathers gleamed as she vanished over the treetops, a glint of light against the dark horizon. Ronan and Loran watched until she was just a glimmer in the distance, their hearts lifted by the fierce strength of their ally, yet heavy with the knowledge of the battle that lay ahead. As Skryla disappeared over the horizon, the quiet of the clearing was broken by the approach of the battlebear and warwolf leaders, their powerful forms moving with a quiet grace as they emerged from the shadows of the trees. The massive bear's amber eyes glinted with intelligence, and the warwolf's low growl carried a sense of duty, their alliance with the druids deeply ingrained. Loran's eyes widened in awe and a flicker of fear. He instinctively stepped behind Ronan, unsure of how to react to the creatures that stood nearly as tall as he did. He watched, astonished, as Ronan spoke to the leaders in a low, rhythmic tone. The bear and the wolf responded in soft grunts and growls, their eyes fixed intently on Ronan. "Wildspeak," Ronan explained to Loran with a small smile, glancing over his shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The druids taught me their language. It's a way of connecting with the world around us, understanding animals as allies, not just creatures." Loran watched, captivated, as Ronan continued to communicate with the animals. The battle bear let out a low rumble, nodding in acknowledgement, while the warwolf's gaze shifted toward the black tree, sharp with intent. "They'll keep this site patrolled regularly," Ronan added, "until Skryla has a chance to destroy the hub and sever the link to Malghora." Loran's face lit up with newfound admiration as he looked at his brother, his awe overcoming his earlier fear. He'd never imagined his brother had such a bond with these mighty creatures, or that they could understand each other so completely. With a final nod to the animal leaders, Ronan turned to Loran, a warm smile on his face. "Come on, little brother. Let's go home." The two brothers walked side by side, leaving the eerie black tree behind them. The battle bear and warwolf melted back into the forest, their forms disappearing into the undergrowth, guardians of the realm who would ensure no darkness remained unchecked.